Okay, I'm at 7610 Kings Run Road in Dayton, Ohio, doing a sanitary lateral inspection for the purchase of a home. We're looking for mainly any structural issues, but anything that would be concerning to the buyer, roots, bellies, low spots, anything like that. Our access point is a front outside clean out right here. I did have to find it with a metal detector. It's right in front of the front door. There's the front walk coming up. It goes out to the driveway, and there is the clean out here. And so this is a cast iron clean out, which means most likely, based off the year of the home and everything, that this has a sweep in it, which will only allow me to inspect from here out to the main. It does not allow me to go back in towards the house. And you'll see it looks like that it turns immediately, and that is just the line. Basically, it's forcing my camera to go downstream. I'm gonna have to run. This usually happens to the bottom of the. As soon as the camera gets in, it rubs against the bottom of the pipe and gets a bunch of goo on it until it gets horizontal. So we'll push it out for a minute, see if there's any water in there, but I'm probably going to have to pull back, and then we will run some water in the house, and hopefully that will allow me to see a little bit better. So I'm going to pause the video for a second and go turn some water on. Okay, a little bit of water running. And there we go. That's what we were looking for. Just hopefully get it all cleaned off. That's usually what happens is, and then you try to pull it back and I try to wipe the camera head off, and then I end up, which I am still going to try to do that, maybe with the water running when I get in there. That's usually what happens. So as soon as you try to go into a clean out, you're going vertical, and then it switches to horizontal, and in the process the camera head hits the bottom of the pipe and gets goo all over it. Just like that again. Of course, it went straight in the first time very easily. There we go. Alright. So, I want to mention a couple things about cast iron. Cast iron does rust, obviously, and so because we are unable to inspect the interior line, there's a few things about cast iron that I always mention. I may have done this on a previous video, but I usually do. The cast iron is known for just being a little bit more prevalent of having soft clogs, which is, clogs caused by excessive toilet paper or wet wipes, stuff like that. Just because of how rough the interior of the pipe is, it tends to catch easier. Like, those things tend to catch a lot easier on the line. And so, just, don't use any wet wipes, which I don't think people should anyway. If you're going to use them, throw them in the trash. But the interior lines being cast iron, it's more common to have that happen, especially in sink lines too, where all the food and stuff goes, and the laundry lines. So just make sure that you're only putting things down there that you're supposed to. See, we have a little bit of root intrusion here, which I kind of expect to have. It's the most common thing we find as the line switches over to clay. And so we're going to leave the water running and see if we can inspect the line all the way out. But we may have to turn it off to be able to see. Just because it seems like the water level is fairly high. Push out, there we go. You can see we are in clay. We should have been in clay pretty much right after we exited the clean out. And so we are limited by the There's a little bit of root intrusion there, but we are limited because of the access. So we can't go back in the house and look at the stuff under the floor. But cast iron does get rough. If you start noticing that you're getting slower lines running, you may want to do a cleaning. The thing about cast iron is you don't want to use any kind of like Drano products because it can actually disintegrate the pipe from within. Root killer does not do that. You use like a Root X, but Drano products are more caustic and they can cause damage. So far, I've seen a little bit of minor root intrusion in the clay. Root intrusion in clay is very, very common. It's 80 to 90% of the lines that I do have some form of root intrusion if they're made out of clay. You can see this is all very minor right now. In fact, you could do as long as what was underwater earlier isn't real bad. This is all treatable with a chemical. You could put like a Root X down here maybe once a year. You could start when you move in just to see. In fact, looking at the white nature of those roots, they may have already been treated, but could just be dead. I mean, for the most part, this is looking really, really good. The minor amount of root intrusion is not causing any issue that I could see. Like I said, we'll turn the water off when we get all the way to the main. It looks like the water is escaping normally. That's been real concerning, but using a root killer is usually will help kind of as a preventative maintenance measure to keep them from growing thick and getting down into the flow line, stuff like that. You can see that it's not very much water, it's just we've got so much running through here. But it's a good way to see how the line is flowing, and then we'll get to the main, we'll turn the water off, let it drain down a little bit, and then we'll take a look at it on the way back. There's a little bit more roots. Again, very minor. Really couldn't even have it cleaned at this point for something like that, just because it would most likely they wouldn't even be able to feel the resistance of those roots because they're so small. And because they are at the edge of the flow line like that, it's good because they won't. It's good because the Root X, well, the foaming agent should get up and catch on that just enough to where it should burn back those roots a little bit and keep them from getting really thick. But yeah, from what I saw on the way out, we're out about 124 feet, and from what I saw, the line looked really good structurally. Had a few spots of some really, really minor root intrusion. It is something you do want to obviously monitor. Make sure it doesn't get thick. Maybe, like I mentioned, use some of that Root X or something similar, a root killer, that will go through the line. Just make sure it's not going to affect the cast iron. I know Root X doesn't. I'm not 100% sure on some of the other products. I just know, Root X claims to not do any damage to the cast iron because it doesn't have that same kind of caustic agents as like Drano and those big. They have some form of acid in them, and that can basically it increases the oxidation and can rust through the pipe quicker, and so that's why you don't want to use those. But Root X should be perfectly fine to use. But yeah, that really, like I said, what I saw on the way out, the line looks really good for its age. It just might need a little bit of maintenance. So I'm going to pause the video. We're going to shut the water off. We're going to let it drain down, and then we will re-inspect on the way back. intrusion. So hopefully we don't see anything that would require any kind of cleaning or anything. Like I mentioned earlier, I did have to dig up the clean out. It was probably 8 inches deep, and so it's never been opened before. And so it's usually an indication that the line's never been cleaned. Or if they have, they cleaned it from a fixture and probably couldn't get a big knife in, which would usually indicate a lot more roots if they were in there. Oh, yeah, there's a decent amount here, so that's probably what was going on, is why we were underwater. There's a decent amount. Yeah, this one's a pretty big chunk right here at 20 feet. We're hoping we can get, maybe we can get a little bit of, go back and forth through this area. Maybe try to get the water to drain down a little bit by holding it open. Get a better look at all this. Because I think that's kind of what we're doing here, is we got enough root intrusion that's holding back some water. You can see that the water's kind of going by. Let's see if we can get it to Good news is now you'll have access to this clean out so that somebody can get into it. Yeah, right here, 26 feet. You can see that a lot better now. And it's really not that big, it's just getting down in the flow line and starting to hold back water, so you do want to have that cleaned. But probably another one here at about 23 feet is where we're going to hit the next, and it looks like it's growing through here. So this may just be these bushes. Yeah, yep, that one's almost the entire. You can see that it's growing in pretty thick, and as shallow as the line is with these bushes, I'd say it's probably these bushes. Yep, there's this one. I do have felt a little bit of resistance on that one. So 19, 23, 27, so that's pretty heavy. It's another thick one. So 15 to 27 feet. I didn't really feel much resistance when I was pushing out, but those are pretty thick root balls. 14 to 27 feet. There's some soap. And here we are back in the clean out. So, yeah, really the line looked really good structurally, but you're going to have it cleaned. 19 to spots there between 19 and 27 feet. Or I'm sorry, 14 and 7. 14 and 27. And so we'll just say between, 10 and 30 feet is the worst spot. There's that 20 foot section. But we'll just make a generalization as far as 10 to 30 feet are the worst areas that really need to be concentrated on. The rest of them are thin enough to where you probably don't even have a whole lot to do anything about. But overall, the line looks good structurally. Just going to need cleaning, and like I mentioned before, you will need to do some preventative maintenance in the future. Some of the Rudex or something for once a year or so after the cleaning. So you do the cleaning, wait a year, and start doing the chemical treatments, and hopefully that will let you know in about 5 years how, if any, of the roots have grown back, and how often you'll need to do any maintenance and or any more cleanings if that's going to be necessary if the chemical is doing its job. So that's going to end the inspection at 7610 Kings Run Road in Dayton, Ohio.